Well, Tom, I just think we've got to be sensible about this. The JobKeeper program was a necessary support, but it's not an ideal program to have in place for any length of time, given its cost to taxpayers. It was originally going to cost around $20 billion a month. It's been revised down because the economy hasn't fallen as fast as we thought to around $10 billion a month. But all of that money is borrowed. We are borrowing all of that money, and it means it has to be paid back sometime by Australian taxpayers. And so we should keep JobKeeper as long as necessary, but not longer, not any longer, because it is very costly. So the review should occur in a common sense way. The change of the childcare situation is quite a different one, given the government support there. But for the general economy, we should just look sensibly about this. And I think small businesses in this country can know that we've got their back. We have provided the support required when needed, but we're also mindful of the taxpayers' interests here and how much this is costing.
All right, turning to the Black Lives Matter protests over the weekend, it seemed to be quite peaceful, an effort made to avoid risk of COVID, albeit, obviously not possible to avoid all risk, and given how close together some of the protesters were. What did you make of what happened?
Well, I agreed completely with the Finance Minister on Sunday. It was reckless, it was selfish, it was self-indulgent, as hundreds of thousands, millions of Australians have sacrificed things in the last few months to get us to the position we are in. For what was a smaller number of Australians to put all of that at risk was incredibly selfish. People have not gone to funerals of loved ones. On Sunday I was live streaming Mass, so I have done that for 3 months. I actually don't mind it because you don't have to worry about keeping the kids behaved in the pews. But I haven't been to Mass for 3 months. I like to get communion every Sunday. I haven't been able to do that. But it's right to sacrifice, and clearly right given the health outcomes we've achieved, and all of that potentially put at risk. Now hopefully there's a strong chance that we won't see a spike given the low number of active cases, but given the medical advice, it just wasn't worth the risk. And it's particularly unfortunate that some politicians have gone out themselves and defied the medical advice. It's the wrong message to send.
We saw one of them, for example, Graham Perrott, saying he wore a mask, he was washing his hands with alcohol, and he was physically distancing from people. I mean, it was possible, was it not, to protest and do it in a way that didn't personally put themselves at risk of spread and whatever else happens, throughout their time, whether or not they're coming to Parliament this week?
Whatever Graham says, it's still a double standard, because I could have done that. I could put a mask on, I could socially distance, and I could wash my hands at church. But we're only allowed 20 at churches at the moment in Queensland. I could socially distance and put on a mask and keep away from people down the pub, but you're only allowed a few number of people down the pub at the moment. You're not allowed 30,000 on the streets as a general rule. And I just don't understand why a Member of Parliament could think that it is the right message to send to the Australian people that a different rule applies to me than everybody else. That's the one thing that Australians hate. They hate to see that somehow there should be rules different from others. We're meant to be a society that is equal, that believes in a fair go, and a fair go would mean that we all chip in to sacrifice to deliver good health outcomes, which has largely occurred. And this is just one of only a few disappointing examples where people have breached those collective understandings.
Do you get, though, why it was very hard for people that feel passionately about this not to seize momentum? So rarely is there momentum, widespread momentum on this issue, on issues of issues to do with Indigenous Australians, that they thought this is not going to have the same feeling if they just waited for 6 months.
Yeah, but Tom, it's just, as I say, how many times do you get to say goodbye to a loved one when they pass away? And I know, I fortunately haven't been in that situation, but I know people have lost loved ones and they haven't been able to go to a funeral. They don't have that chance in 6 months' time. They made that sacrifice. I really and seriously, not being able to go to a protest march. Look, let's get real too. A lot of this is virtual signalling, right? A lot of people go along, particularly the politicians, right? Graham Perrott goes along so he can put a few photos up on Facebook and show that he's part of the cause. I mean, it is selfish and self-indulgent when you're potentially putting other people at risk.
On Friday, just to jump in, Senator, he said his son opened up a conversation with him about Indigenous issues in Australia, including all the different impacts on Indigenous Australians, even just incarceration rate. I mean, 3% of the population, 30% of the prison population, and that's why he went along with his son. It's a bit much to just assume that he went there for some photos to put up, isn't it?
Well, he didn't have to put them up on Facebook, Tom. He didn't have to promote himself while he's there. And, I know what it's like as a politician. You do that to signal and get a message out, and usually that's perfectly fine. But when you're defying medical advice to do so, I think it's particularly irresponsible and unfortunate. And, look, there's nothing we can do to keep these guys, keep Janet Rice or Graham away from Parliament this week, but they are now putting at risk, everybody else here. And it is just shocking, I think, that after everything has been done, there's just a few people who are trying to wreck it for all of us. I mean, particularly if there is a spike, right? Let's say there is. I mean, I don't think there possibly will be, but if there is, that's going to slow down reopening. It's going to keep businesses shut for longer. It's going to keep the tourism industry in places like Queensland with the borders shut on tenterhooks for months. And the people that have gone to these protests will be at least partly responsible for that outcome. As I say, let's hope it's unlikely, but it's at least a potential right now, and that's a great, great shame.